The Xixians had once been a powerful race, their civilization spreading across the stars like a bright, unstoppable force. Known for their technological marvels and peaceful ways, they had made alliances with many advanced species in the galaxy. They built cities that soared above oceans, crafted technology that could bend the laws of physics, and explored the furthest reaches of space. They were an example to others, a symbol of what a civilization could become when united in knowledge and peace. But now, all that was fading away. The Xixian homeworld, a planet named Xixa, was slowly dying. Its skies, once clear and bright, had grown dark and full of strange, swirling clouds. The oceans that had once teemed with life were now quiet, empty of the vibrant ecosystems that had thrived for millennia. It wasn't a natural disaster. There was no earthquake or volcanic eruption. No, something far more mysterious was happening. Something no one could understand. For years, the Xixians had searched for answers. Their scientists worked tirelessly, trying to find the cause of the disaster that was consuming their world. But no matter how hard they tried, they could not find the source. There were no visible enemies, no wars that had been waged against them. It was as if the very planet was rejecting its inhabitants, slowly swallowing everything in a silent, invisible force. The Xixians had called out to the other great civilizations of the galaxy for help. They sent messages, transmitted signals, and even traveled to distant star systems, hoping for a response. But every plea went unanswered. The galaxy, once full of life and cooperation, had grown cold. Species that once called themselves allies now ignored the Xixians, leaving them to face their fate alone. And so, the Xixian Council, made up of the most respected leaders and thinkers, gathered to discuss their dwindling options. They had tried everything they could think of. They had used their most advanced technology, consulted their most brilliant minds, and reached out to their closest allies. Yet nothing had worked. Xixa continued to die. In this meeting, a proposal was brought forward by a young, ambitious scientist named Ilara. She was not a member of the council, but her ideas had always stood out. What if, she suggested, the answer is not in the stars, but right here, within ourselves? What if we are looking at this problem all wrong? The council, wary of new ideas after years of failure, listened carefully. Ilara continued, "Perhaps the galaxy isn't the solution. Perhaps it is another species, one that hasn't turned away from us. A species that has yet to prove itself on a galactic scale, but has shown remarkable resilience. A species that could offer us a different way of thinking." She spoke of humanity. At first, the council dismissed her suggestion. Humans were young, their civilization still growing and untested compared to the long-standing powers of the galaxy. How could they help the Xixians? They had no advanced technology, no alliances with ancient races. But Ilara's words lingered in their minds. What if she was right? What if humanity, with all its flaws and struggles, held the key to their salvation? And so, after much debate, the council made a decision. They would send a signal, a message, directed toward Earth, asking for help. It was a risky move, but it was their last chance. The message was simple. We, the Xixians, once stood tall in the galaxy. Now we face the end. If you hear us, we ask for your aid. The fate of our species lies in your hands. The transmission was sent out across the vastness of space, a single plea carried on waves of energy, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would answer. Weeks passed, and the Xixians continued to watch their world fall apart. They saw their cities crumble, their once proud civilization teetering on the brink of extinction. But just as they were losing all hope, something incredible happened. A reply came. It was faint at first, just a small, almost imperceptible signal that cut through the cosmic noise. Then, the message grew clearer. It was from Earth. A human voice, calm, reassuring, and full of warmth, spoke across the stars. "We received your message. We are here. Help is on the way." For the first time in years, the Xixians felt a glimmer of hope. The humans had heard their call. They were coming. The Zixians didn't know much about humanity. They had heard stories of the humans' battles with their own struggles, their wars, and their resilience in the face of adversity. But what they didn't know was how different this race truly was. The humans had something the galaxy had forgotten: a willingness to fight for others, to look past differences, and to offer help without expecting anything in return. As the Zixians waited for the humans to arrive, a sense of anticipation filled the air. Could humanity really be the answer they had been searching for? Would they be the ones to save Zixa from its slow, painful death? The future of an entire civilization rested in the hands of a race that had only just begun to explore the stars. But the Zixians would soon learn that the humans were not just coming to save them. They were coming to offer something far more valuable. The day the humans arrived, the skies above Zixa were filled with a strange mixture of excitement and fear. The Zixians had never met a species from Earth before, and the unknown always carries a sense of uncertainty. Still, there was no denying the hope that had blossomed in their hearts when the message had been received. The humans had promised to help. Now, they were coming to fulfill that promise. The human spacecraft, a sleek, white vessel with the design of a race just beginning to master space travel, landed in the Zixian capital city. The Zixians had never seen a ship like it before. It was small compared to their vast city ships, but it had a certain elegance and simplicity. As it touched down gently on the surface, a crowd of Zixians gathered, their faces filled with curiosity and cautious optimism. Ilara, the young scientist who had suggested contacting Earth, was among the first to greet the human team. She was nervous, but she had spent the last few days thinking about this moment, about what it would mean for her people, and whether humanity could truly offer what they needed. The first human to step out of the ship was a man named Captain David Montgomery. He was tall, with short dark hair and a calm, confident demeanor. Behind him followed his team: scientists, engineers, and diplomats. People who had come with only one mission: to help the Zixians survive. The captain raised his hand in greeting, his voice clear and steady. "We received your message. I'm Captain David Montgomery of the United Earth Alliance. We're here to help." The Zixian leaders, including Ilara, stood silently for a moment, unsure of how to respond. They had sent a desperate plea into the vastness of space, not expecting much in return. And yet, here were humans, simple, unassuming humans, standing before them with an offer of help. It was almost too much to believe. Ilara was the first to step forward. "You've come," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "You actually came." Captain Montgomery smiled gently. "Of course. When we received your message, we knew we couldn't ignore it. We're not the kind of people who turn our backs when others need us." His words were simple, but they carried a weight of sincerity that resonated deeply with the Zixians. For the first time in a long while, they felt something they hadn't felt in years: hope. The humans were escorted to the Zixian council chambers, where the leaders had gathered to discuss the next steps. The room was large, with tall pillars stretching upward like the trees of their ancient forests. The walls were covered in intricate patterns of light that pulsed softly, a testament to the Zixians' advanced understanding of energy. But even within this magnificent room, the sadness of their planet's decay was evident. The air felt heavy with the knowledge that time was running out. Captain Montgomery and his team took their seats at the table, and the Zixians began to speak, explaining the full extent of the disaster. They described the strange cosmic anomaly that was slowly draining the life force from their world, how it had started as a small disturbance in their atmosphere, but over time, it had grown into something far more dangerous, something that even their greatest minds could not understand. "We have tried everything," Ilara said, her voice filled with frustration. "Our technology, our science, it's all failed. Nothing we do can stop it. We are running out of time." Captain Montgomery listened quietly, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the details. He then turned to his team, who had been studying the data sent from Zixa during their journey. The humans were not as advanced as the Zixians in terms of pure technology, but they had something the Zixians didn't: a resilience born of survival and adaptability. "We may not have your advanced technology," Captain Montgomery said after a long pause, "but we have a different kind of strength. We are a species that has fought its way from the brink of destruction, and we've learned to adapt to challenges in ways you may not have considered." The Zixians listened intently, intrigued by his words. The human team, led by their engineers and scientists, presented a new approach. Instead of focusing solely on technological solutions, they suggested something more unconventional, working together in ways the Zixians had never considered. The humans believed that their unique approach to problem-solving could help the Zixians see the crisis in a new light. They would not only bring new technology to the table, but also a fresh perspective, one that combined innovation with unity. "We need to think beyond the technology," said Dr. Elizabeth Shaw, a scientist on Captain Montgomery's team. "Maybe the solution isn't just to fight the anomaly head-on with more power. Perhaps the answer lies in finding a way to coexist with it, to understand it as part of the universe, not something we simply need to conquer." Her words puzzled the Zixians at first. They had always believed that problems could be solved through sheer force and technological superiority. But as the humans spoke more about their philosophy of balance, adaptability, and empathy, the Zixians began to see the possibility of a different path, one they had never imagined before. Captain Montgomery stood, his gaze sweeping over the gathered leaders. "We're not here to tell you how to save your world. We're here to help you find your own solution. Together." The Zixians, despite their doubts, began to feel a shift in the air, a feeling that they might not be alone in this fight after all. Perhaps humanity could offer them more than just assistance. Perhaps they could offer them a new way to survive, and even thrive, in the face of adversity. For the first time in years, the Zixians felt a glimmer of something they had long since lost: the belief that, no matter the odds, they could overcome the impossible. The days following the humans' arrival on Zixa were filled with a whirlwind of activity. Despite the initial shock of their visit, the Zixians began to realize that this partnership could bring something new, something they desperately needed. The humans had not come with promises of quick fixes or miracle solutions. Instead, they had come with open minds, ready to offer their knowledge and perspective in ways the Zixians had never considered before. It was a humbling experience for the Zixians, who had always believed that technology and logic were the answers to all problems. Ilara found herself working alongside Dr. Elizabeth Shaw, one of the lead scientists from Earth, in their efforts to understand the cosmic anomaly that threatened Zixa. Dr. Shaw was kind and patient, explaining concepts in simple terms, even as she worked through the most complicated data. The two women quickly formed a bond, driven by their shared desire to save Zixa. "We can't just look at this as a problem to be fixed," Dr. Shaw explained one evening as they studied the data. "We need to think of it as a puzzle, something that has a pattern, even if it's one we don't fully understand yet." Ilara nodded, but there was a hint of doubt in her eyes. "But how can we approach it without using the technology we have? The anomaly is so powerful. We've tried everything our scientists know. Nothing has worked." Dr. Shaw smiled gently, as if she had expected this question. "Sometimes, the answers lie in things we can't measure with technology alone. You Zixians are brilliant, but perhaps you've forgotten the importance of balance. Your world is dying because you're trying to fight against something that's part of nature. Maybe the solution lies in learning how to coexist with it instead of battling it." Ilara paused, reflecting on the words. She had always thought of nature and science as separate, something to be controlled and understood through technology. But now she began to wonder, could the solution really be about balance? Meanwhile, Captain Montgomery and his team had been working with the Zixian leaders, including those in charge of the planet's energy systems. Their efforts were focused on a critical issue: the collapse of Zixa's energy network, which had been damaged by the effects of the anomaly. Without power, the Zixians would be unable to sustain their cities, their vital systems, or even their food supplies. The situation was becoming more urgent by the day. "We need to create a temporary energy shield around the planet," Captain Montgomery suggested one afternoon as he reviewed the plans with the Zixian engineers. "It won't stop the anomaly, but it will buy us time to understand it better and work on a more permanent solution." The Zixian engineers, skilled and highly knowledgeable in energy systems, were initially hesitant. They had tried everything they could think of to fix the grid, and nothing had worked. But Captain Montgomery's suggestion was different. It wasn't about fixing the core issue right away. It was about giving them time to find a more lasting solution. After much discussion, the Zixians agreed to give the plan a try. They used a mix of their own technology and the humans' innovative energy manipulation techniques to create a temporary shield. It was a delicate operation, but when the shield was activated, the city lights flickered on once more, and a wave of relief washed over the people of Zixa. "Well done," said Captain Montgomery, offering a rare smile as he watched the Zixians celebrate their success. "This is just the beginning. Now we need to keep moving forward." In the weeks that followed, the humans and Zixians worked side by side, combining their knowledge in ways neither species had imagined. The Zixians began to embrace new ideas, stepping away from their old ways of thinking. They listened to the humans, and in turn, the humans learned from the Zixians' deep connection to their planet. The bond between the two species grew stronger with each passing day, and Ilara began to see that the solution to their problem was not just in technology, but in cooperation, something the Zixians had long overlooked. It wasn't just about science, it was about a deeper understanding of the world they all shared. The humans taught the Zixians to look at the anomaly not as a force to be fought, but as something they could learn from. By working together and combining their strengths, the two species could begin to unravel the mystery and find a way to restore balance to Zixa. One evening, as Ilara walked through the newly illuminated streets of the city, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. The air, though still heavy with the remnants of the anomaly's effects, seemed clearer. The people of Zixa were no longer weighed down by despair. They were beginning to believe that survival was possible, perhaps even a new beginning. Ilara turned to Dr. Shaw, who had walked alongside her. "I never imagined that we would be here, working together like this. The Zixians have always been so proud of their accomplishments, but I think we're learning something new now." Dr. Shaw smiled, her eyes twinkling with understanding. "The greatest discoveries often come when we least expect them. You Zixians have so much to offer, Ilara. And we humans, we've got a lot to learn from you too." As the two women watched the night sky, the stars seemed to shine just a little brighter. It wasn't just the light of distant suns that illuminated their path. It was the growing hope of a partnership that could save not only Zixa, but the galaxy itself. And as the humans and Zixians continued to work together, one thing was clear: the seed of hope had been planted. Now, it was up to both species to nurture it and see where it could grow. The energy shield had given the Zixians a sense of relief, but it was only a temporary measure. The problem they faced was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. The anomaly, an invisible force that drained the life force of their planet, was not something that could be solved with a quick fix. Despite the progress they had made, there was still a long road ahead. Ilara, working closely with Dr. Shaw, continued to dig through the data, hoping for a breakthrough. They had made small advances, but nothing that could offer a permanent solution. The more they studied the anomaly, the more it seemed to defy their understanding of the universe. It was as if the laws of nature themselves were being bent, altered in a way that had never been observed before. "It's almost as if the anomaly is alive," Ilara said one evening, her voice filled with frustration as she stared at the data on her screen. "It doesn't behave like any natural force we've encountered. It adapts, it shifts. Whatever is causing this is beyond anything we can predict." Dr. Shaw nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking the same thing. It's almost as if the anomaly is a living organism, but on a cosmic scale. It's feeding off Six's energy, but there's something more to it. If we can understand how it's feeding, maybe we can figure out a way to stop it. Ilara looked at Dr. Shaw, her mind racing with new possibilities. You think it could be a form of life? It's a theory, Dr. Shaw replied. We've only seen the surface of it, but if this anomaly is alive in some way, then maybe the answer isn't about fighting it or controlling it. Maybe it's about understanding its role in the universe and finding a way to coexist with it. The idea of coexistence had become a central theme in their work. It was a concept that had first been suggested by Captain Montgomery, and it was one that the humans and Zixians were beginning to explore together. For the Zixians, who had always seen themselves as rulers of their planet, the idea of coexisting with something they couldn't control was difficult to accept. But as time passed, more and more of them began to see the wisdom in the humans' approach. Captain Montgomery and his team had been instrumental in pushing the idea of balance, both in terms of their technology and their philosophy. Nature, Captain Montgomery had said during one of their meetings, isn't something to conquer. It's something to understand. The more we fight against it, the more we damage ourselves. We have to learn to live with it, to work with it. At first, the Zixians had balked at the idea. They were used to controlling their environment, using their advanced technology to shape the world around them. But as they worked alongside the humans, they began to understand the deeper meaning behind these words. The human race, despite their technological advancements, had learned to live in harmony with their planet, taking only what they needed and giving back when possible. One afternoon, as Ilara walked through a park in the capital, she was struck by the sight of a group of Zixian children playing in the soft grass. It was a simple scene, yet it made her pause. The children were laughing, their carefree joy a reminder of the beauty that still existed in their world. Despite the looming threat of the anomaly, life on Zixa still had moments of peace and joy. Ilara sat down on a bench, her mind swirling with the ideas that had been shared during the last few days of collaboration. The humans had shown them that technology alone was not enough to save their planet. It was the balance between science, nature, and cooperation that would be the key to their survival. Dr. Shaw joined her on the bench, her presence calm and reassuring. "You look deep in thought," she said with a soft smile. Ilara turned to her, the weight of the situation still heavy on her shoulders. "I've been thinking about what you said, that maybe the anomaly is alive. If that's true, then what if we've been approaching it all wrong? What if it's not a disease we need to cure, but a part of the cycle of life on our planet?" Dr. Shaw's eyes brightened at the thought. Exactly. Maybe this anomaly isn't an enemy at all. Maybe it's just a natural part of the universe, something that's come to teach us a new way of thinking, a way of living in balance with everything around us. The idea began to take root in Ilara's mind. If the anomaly was a living, evolving force, then perhaps it had a purpose beyond destruction. Perhaps it was a sign of change, something that the Zixians had been unable to see because they were so focused on maintaining the status quo. They had always been the dominant species on their planet, shaping it according to their needs. But now, perhaps, it was time for something new. "I think you're right," Ilara said slowly, her voice filled with realization. "We've spent so much time trying to fix the problem by using our technology, but maybe what we really need is a change in perspective. Maybe we need to start thinking about how to coexist with the anomaly, instead of fighting it." Dr. Shaw smiled warmly. "That's the spirit, and the humans are here to help you make that shift. Together, we can figure out how to live in harmony with the forces that shape your world." As the sun set over the city, casting a warm glow across the landscape, Ilara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, she believed that the Zixians could find a way to heal, not just their planet, but their way of thinking. They would learn to live in harmony with the universe, just as the humans had. And perhaps, through this journey of cooperation and understanding, both species would emerge stronger and wiser than before. The days were growing shorter, and the threat of the anomaly loomed larger. Yet, The Zixians and humans were working tirelessly side by side, trying to make sense of this strange cosmic force that seemed to have a mind of its own. The atmosphere of Zixa, which had once been filled with despair and fear, had begun to shift. Now there was a quiet sense of anticipation, a feeling that the answers were closer than they had ever been before. Ilara had always believed in logic, in science, in the power of technology to solve problems. But now, as she spent more time with the humans and observed their way of thinking, she began to realize that there was more to the universe than equations and formulas. There was a beauty to the unknown, a mystery that could not always be solved by the tools of science alone. She had come to understand that sometimes the answer wasn't in what you could measure, but in what you could feel. One evening, as she walked through the gardens of the Zixian capital, she found Dr. Shaw sitting quietly on a stone bench, gazing up at the stars. The sky above them had turned a deep shade of indigo, with countless stars twinkling like diamonds. Ilara joined her, sitting down beside her in comfortable silence. "Do you ever wonder if we're just one small part of something much larger?" Ilara asked, her voice soft, as she looked up at the same stars. Dr. Shaw smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the distant stars. "All the time. The universe is so vast, so full of unknowns. But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The more we learn, the more we realize how much there is still to discover." Ilara nodded, taking in the quiet beauty of the night. "I've been thinking about the anomaly. Maybe it's not trying to destroy us. Maybe it's trying to show us something." Dr. Shaw's eyes widened with understanding. "I think you're onto something. What if the anomaly isn't just a force of destruction, but a force of change? Perhaps it's a part of a larger cycle, one that's beyond our understanding right now." Ilara let the thought settle in her mind. For so long, she had seen the anomaly as a threat to everything the Zixians had worked for. But now she wondered if it was more than that. What if it was a signal, a messenger, telling them it was time to evolve? She had begun to see the universe differently, not as something to control, but as something to learn from. The next day, the humans and Zixians gathered in the Great Hall to discuss their next steps. Captain Montgomery stood at the head of the table, his voice steady and calm as he addressed the group. "We've made progress, but there's still much to learn. We need to find a way to not only stop the anomaly, but to understand it, to live with it, as we discussed." Ilara stood beside him, her thoughts clearer than they had been in weeks. "I believe the key to solving this problem lies in the way we see it. We've been treating the anomaly like an enemy, something to fight against. But what if it's not an enemy at all? What if it's a part of the natural order of the universe, something we need to learn to coexist with?" Her words hung in the air, and for a moment there was silence. The Zixian leaders exchanged uncertain looks, unsure of how to respond. For centuries, they had prided themselves on their ability to control their world, to shape it to their will. The idea of living alongside something they couldn't control was a difficult concept for them to accept. Captain Montgomery, however, nodded thoughtfully. "This isn't an easy idea to grasp, but I believe it's worth exploring. Sometimes, the greatest challenges we face are not about defeating an enemy, but about learning to work with what we have." Dr. Shaw added, "The universe is full of forces beyond our control. But that doesn't mean we can't find a way to live with them. If we approach the anomaly with this mindset, we might find a solution that none of us expected." Ilara could see the seeds of doubt beginning to sprout in the minds of the Zixian leaders. They had always been taught that they were masters of their destiny, that they had the power to shape the world around them. Now they were being asked to accept something they had never considered before, the possibility that not everything could be controlled. One of the senior leaders, a Zixian named Joreth, spoke up. "But what if this anomaly is beyond our understanding? What if it is truly a force of destruction? How can we live alongside something that could end our civilization?" Ilara met his gaze, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "We don't know what it is yet, but we do know that our past ways of thinking have brought us to this point. If we continue to fight against it, we may only make things worse. Perhaps the answer lies in a new way of thinking, one where we try to understand it, rather than destroy it. Jorith hesitated, his mind clearly wrestling with the concept. After a long pause, he spoke again. I don't know if I agree with you, but I am willing to try. If we can find a way to work with this, then perhaps it is worth exploring. The room was filled with murmurs of agreement, and Ilara felt a wave of hope wash over her. It was not a complete victory, but it was a step in the right direction. The Zixians were beginning to see that there might be a way forward that didn't involve fighting. As the meeting came to a close, Captain Montgomery placed a hand on Ilara's shoulder, his smile warm. You've done it, he said quietly. You've opened their minds. Now we just have to work together to figure out what comes next. Ilara looked out the window, where the stars were beginning to twinkle once again. It was a small step, but it was a step towards something greater. Perhaps in the end, it wasn't just about saving Zixa. Perhaps it was about changing the way the Zixians saw the universe, and teaching them that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in control, but in understanding. Weeks passed, and the collaboration between the humans and Zixians grew deeper. The once uneasy alliance had transformed into a powerful partnership, fueled by the shared belief that the anomaly was not their enemy, but a challenge to be understood. They had learned that survival was not about domination, but adaptation. Together, they made steady progress, uncovering pieces of the cosmic puzzle that had threatened to destroy their world. Ilara stood at the edge of Zix's vast ocean, watching the waves crash gently against the shore. The ocean had always been a place of peace for her, a reminder of the planet's natural beauty. But now, even the ocean seemed different. It was as if the planet itself was speaking to her, urging her to look beyond the obvious and see the connections that bound everything together. Dr. Shaw walked up beside her, her footsteps light on the sand. Do you think we're close to understanding it? She asked, her voice full of curiosity. Ilara glanced at her, deep in thought. I'm not sure. The more we learn, the more complex the anomaly becomes. But I do think we're beginning to see its patterns. If we can track those patterns, maybe we can understand its purpose. The anomaly had always been unpredictable, its movements erratic and chaotic. But as the humans and Zixians worked together, they began to notice that it followed certain rhythms, subtle shifts in the fabric of space and time that could be tracked. It was no longer a random force of destruction. It had a logic, a pattern that could be decoded. I believe we've been looking at it the wrong way, Ilara continued, her voice filled with realization. We've treated it as an external force, something separate from us. But what if it's connected to the very core of Zixa? What if it's part of the planet's natural cycle, a force that has always been there, but has just never been understood? Dr. Shaw nodded slowly. That's a compelling thought. If it's part of Zixa's natural cycle, then it might be something that evolves over time. It might not be something we can destroy, but something we need to learn to live with. The two women stood in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The stars were beginning to appear in the sky, and for the first time in a long while, Ilara felt a sense of hope. They had come so far, and yet there was still so much to learn. Back at the research facility, the humans and Zixians were preparing for their most important experiment yet. After months of study and collaboration, they had finally discovered a way to communicate with the anomaly. At least, they hoped they had. Using a combination of Zixian technology and human energy manipulation techniques, they had created a device that could send a pulse of energy deep into the heart of the anomaly, hoping to establish some form of contact. Ilara was nervous as she stood in the control room, watching the team prepare the device. Captain Montgomery was there, his calm presence a source of reassurance as they went over the final checks. This could be a turning point for us, Captain Montgomery said, his voice steady. But we need to be ready for anything. If the anomaly responds, we need to be prepared to listen, not fight. Ilara nodded, her mind racing. She had always been someone who believed in facts and logic, in clear answers. But now, She realized that there were some things in the universe that could not be explained with certainty. Sometimes, the only thing you could do was open yourself up to the unknown and trust that the answers would come in their own time. As the final countdown began, the room fell into a tense silence. The device hummed softly as it charged, its energy slowly building. The Zixian scientists watched closely, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. The humans, too, stood with bated breath, ready to see what would happen next. "Initiating pulse," announced the lead scientist, her voice tight with anticipation. The moment the pulse was sent, the room was filled with a strange, almost otherworldly hum, as if the very air around them had shifted. For a brief moment, everything seemed still, as if time itself had paused. Then something remarkable happened. The anomaly, which had once been chaotic and unpredictable, began to respond. A soft glow appeared on the screens, rippling across the data in ways they had never seen before. It wasn't the violent surge they had feared. It was a slow, deliberate movement, almost like the anomaly was listening, reacting to the pulse. "It's responding," Dr. Shaw whispered, her voice filled with awe. Ilara watched the data unfold before her eyes, her heart racing. The anomaly was not an enemy. It was something more, something complex, like the planet itself, woven into the fabric of life. For the first time, she understood that it wasn't a force to be feared, but a part of Zix's existence. As the pulse continued, the glow on the screens grew stronger, until it reached a peak. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the light began to fade. The hum of energy quieted, and the room was left in silence. "We did it," Ilara said softly, her voice filled with wonder. Captain Montgomery stepped forward, a proud smile on his face. "We've made contact. Now we can begin to understand it. This is the breakthrough we've been waiting for." But even as they celebrated this momentous achievement, Ilara couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning. They had made the first step, but there was still so much to learn. The anomaly was not something they could control, but something they would need to understand in order to coexist with it. As the team gathered around the monitors, looking at the data they had just collected, Ilara's thoughts turned inward. There was still much work to do, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a deep sense of peace. The anomaly was no longer a threat to be fought. It was a mystery to be unraveled. And together, the humans and Zixians would uncover the secrets it held, one step at a time. The days following their successful contact with the anomaly were filled with excitement and anticipation. The breakthrough had given the humans and Zixians a new sense of purpose. For the first time in ages, Zix's skies felt brighter, its air fresher. The once paralyzing fear of the unknown had begun to lift, replaced by hope, a hope that perhaps the future held something more than destruction. Ilara stood on the balcony of the research facility, looking out over the planet's sprawling landscapes. The horizon was painted with hues of orange and purple as the sun dipped behind the mountains. It was a sight she had seen countless times before, but today it seemed different. The planet felt alive, and not in the way it had once been, where everything was mechanized, controlled, and calculated. It was alive in a new way, a way that embraced change and uncertainty. Dr. Shaw joined her on the balcony, leaning against the stone railing. "I never thought we'd get to this point," she said, her voice filled with quiet awe. "But here we are, on the brink of something extraordinary." Ilara nodded, her thoughts drifting back to the last few weeks. The humans and Zixians had worked together in ways she had never imagined. The technology they had used to communicate with the anomaly had been groundbreaking, but it wasn't just the technology that had made the difference. It was the shift in mindset, the willingness to look beyond old fears and accept the idea of coexistence. They had learned to listen, to understand, and to change. "We've learned so much," Ilara said, turning to Dr. Shaw. "Not just about the anomaly, but about ourselves, about our planet. We used to think we could control everything, bend it to our will. But maybe Maybe the true power lies in working with it, not against it. Dr. Shaw smiled softly. That's the lesson. Nature, the universe, it doesn't work like we think it does. It's not about domination. It's about balance. For days, they had continued to study the anomaly's responses. What they had first believed to be a force of destruction was slowly revealing itself to be a part of Zix's intricate ecosystem, a necessary force for the planet's survival and evolution. It was a living, breathing phenomenon that fed off the planet's energy and, in return, contributed to the balance of life on Zixa. The more they understood, the more they realized that the anomaly was not something to be eradicated, but something to be embraced. It was part of Zix's natural rhythm, a cycle of renewal and change. The anomaly had always been present in some form, but only now had it become strong enough to force the Zixians to confront it. It was a wake-up call, one that had pushed the species to rethink their entire approach to life. A soft chime echoed through the room, and Ilara turned to see a new message on the communication screen. It was from the Zixian Council, the leaders who had once been skeptical of the humans' approach. Now, they were eager to share their findings. The message read, "We have come to understand the anomaly. It is not an enemy. It is a messenger. It has come to show us that the path we were on was unsustainable. We must change, and we must do so together. The humans have taught us that true strength lies in unity. We accept their help, and we welcome the future." Ilara read the message aloud to Dr. Shaw, and the two exchanged a look of wonder. It was a victory, but it wasn't one that could be celebrated with fireworks or speeches. It was a quiet, profound shift in the way a species saw its place in the universe. "We've done it," Ilara said, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "We've helped them see. Together, we've created a new way forward." Dr. Shaw placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done more than that. You've opened their hearts to a new future." The next few days were spent preparing for the planet-wide ceremony to mark the beginning of this new chapter. The Zixian leaders had invited the humans to stand by their side as they officially accepted the anomaly into their understanding of the world. It was a moment of unity, of cooperation between two species that had once been so different, but now shared a common goal: to thrive together in balance with the forces of the universe. On the day of the ceremony, the entire city gathered in the Grand Plaza, a space that had once been used for celebrations of power and control. Now, it was filled with people from all walks of life, standing together in quiet anticipation. The sky above was clear, and the stars shone brightly, as if the universe itself was watching this moment unfold. Ilara stood next to Captain Montgomery, both of them wearing simple ceremonial robes. The leaders of the Zixians stood before them, their eyes filled with determination and hope. Ilara's heart swelled with pride as she realized just how far they had come. Jorith, one of the senior leaders, stepped forward. "Today we stand together as one. We have faced the anomaly, and we have learned from it. It is not our enemy. It is a part of us. We will not fear it. We will work with it. And together, we will build a future where all life on Zixa can thrive." The crowd erupted in applause, and Ilara could feel the weight of the moment settle over her. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but they had finally arrived at this moment of understanding. The Zixians had changed, not just their way of thinking, but their very approach to life. As the ceremony continued, Captain Montgomery leaned in close to Ilara. "This is just the beginning," he said with a smile. "Together, we've opened a new door. Now, we walk through it." Ilara nodded, her gaze drifting toward the stars above. A new dawn was rising, not just for Zixa, but for the universe itself. A dawn where cooperation, understanding, and balance would guide them into a future filled with endless possibilities. And as she stood there, side by side with the humans and Zixians, she knew that the future was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace.